Hey guys, so I wanted to take some time and speak about institutional racism, define what it is and what it isn't. And also take some time to look at some of the arguments that are made by Republicans about institutional racism, arguments that I tend to disagree with, right? When we talk about institutional racism, I define institutional racism as racism that exists within institutions, plain and simple, right? And we have to realize when we talk about institutional racism, there are two types of institutions in the United States. There are both public and private institutions, government institutions like, prison systems, court systems. And then you have, private systems like banks and also other places that have goods and services and the access to those goods and services, things like that, right? And so the arguments that are made by a lot of Republicans, which I seem to disagree with, is that they try to separate people in leadership roles from institutions, which to me makes no sense, because when we're talking about institutions themselves, they are made up of two things. They're made up of the systems in place to help run the institutions and the people in place to help run the systems. Those two are together and they can't be separated. And the argument made by a lot of Republicans is that institutional racism does not exist because the systems in place are not racist, right? Or whatever. Which to me makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. It's like looking at a machine and that doesn't work, and then being the Republican, you look at the machine that doesn't work and say, oh, this machine works because the blueprint has everything there. When you have, a bolt within the machine that's worn down or not functioning the way it's supposed to, which is messing up the entire machine, and that's the problem. And so for the machine isn't working, and then you have Republicans looking at the machine and saying, no, this machine is working 100% properly. There's no way that this machine is malfunctioning. And that's kind of the argument that's made by a lot of Republicans. And to me, that this doesn't make any sense. At what point, right, or how many people have to have biases within an institution for you to consider the institution not functioning the way it's intended to, right? Does it have to be the president, the vice president? Does it have to be, other people in other leadership roles? And the argument made by a lot of Republicans that they say, tell me exactly where the institutional racism is, right? And when you point at people in leadership roles and you say, this is where the bias exists, they say, okay, well, that is a person, not the institution. And they try to separate the two. And you have to realize that institutions are made up of both people and systems, and you cannot separate them. So if there are people in leadership roles within institutions that are biased and that overall affects the institution, making the whole institution itself biased. And that's the argument that I would say you should make if a Republican tries to come and talk to you and say institutional racism does not exist.